Bienvenido a la casa de Ikenna. Hoy en día me encuentro solo como cada otro día de mi vida y I'm going to be talking about my failures as a language learner, things that I've gotten wrong in my language learning career. And I know what you're thinking right now. You're thinking, Kenna, I thought you were this perfect Nigerian, Irish, polyglottis, Maximus. Honestly, I'm not perfect. Like, I would say 22% of the time I'm not perfect, all right? I am a completely flawed INTJ that is afraid to leave my house because the world is chaotic and my office is not. But, alas, let's sit down because I cannot stand for that long. Let me tell you guys a story. So, the goal of this video is to tell you not just one story, but multiple stories about how I messed up my language learning so you don't have to repeat the same mistakes that I made. So let's gather around the campfire and discuss. The first way that I messed up my languages was by being overly reliant on a single program or textbook, especially back in my beginner days when I was 15 years old learning Japanese for the first time, or when I was 17 learning Russian. I tended to be overly reliant on a single program. I would look at something like Asimil and be like, oh, this is the only thing I need to do, and it says that it's going to take me to B1, then I would finish it. I'd be like, where is my fluency? I am not B1 level. I would be like, oh, that's weird. I finished this one program and I thought I would be a bit better, but whatever, I'm going to focus on the next program 100%. And what I would do is I would overlook the rest of language learning. I would overlook watching TV shows and actively learning through them, overlook, listening to music or finding people on YouTube to listen to. I would think that I need this textbook or I need this program in order to actually, get past the beginning stages. And while these programs are useful, ultimately over the years, I came to the realization that the goal of the beginning stage is to learn and acquire the most common 1,000 to 1,500 words in any given language, and also to get a basic understanding of the grammar. That can be done in a lot of different ways. Textbooks are great, and programs like Pimsleur and Asimil are great, but they're not the be-all, end-all. Literally, if I were to go back nowadays to Japanese, to Russian, literally what I would have done is I would have had my Anki deck, and I would have went through the top 250 most common verbs, 250 most common nouns, 250 most common adjectives. I would have learned them, and I would have maybe learned 5 words or 10 words a day, in addition to watching a lot of TV and trying to actively learn from TV shows. Of course, I would have used a program as well, but it wouldn't have been the only thing that I focused on. And I feel like when you do take in the language, especially as a beginner, from multiple different sources, it's always good. That was a big thing that really hampered my learning initially. The second way that I messed up was looking at someone, maybe similar to myself in a weird way. Someone who was a polyglot, let's say they were on YouTube, or someone who was just a very accomplished language learner in their own right, and I would look at them and be like, wow, this person is amazing. I'm gonna follow every single thing that they do to a T. I don't advise people to do that. From my personal experience, there are a lot of different personality types out there. If you go by the Myers-Briggs system, which some people say is a bit unscientific, and it is, but the cognitive functions that underlie the system are quite concrete. But even if it is unscientific, pad thai is unscientific, I still love it, and it still has value for my life, and I do like the system. So taking that into consideration, myself as an INTJ, if I go and look at, someone who's super extroverted, their method of language learning and their method of just what's going to make them happy in life is going to be vastly different from mine. Someone might be like, oh, in order to be happy in life, you have to get a lot of friends and live in the moment and travel a lot. Whereas an INTJ, that's not what would make me happy. So it's the same thing. You have to critically look at not the advice that someone is giving you, but the person behind that advice. What are they like? Do they have a similar personality type to you? Does their mind function the same way? Are they introverted? Are they extroverted? You want to find someone who mirrors you and mirrors your personality, that is also an amazing language learner to take advice from. For example, if I give ESTP or ENTP 50 words, drop them off in the middle of Tokyo, by the afternoon they'll make 6 friends, they've already attended a wedding, they have a good functional understanding of the language. Like, they've got this. They are the type that will go, take little resources, talk to a bunch of people from day one, and build up their understanding that way, and that's what they prefer. Whereas me as an INTJ, if you give me 500 of the most common words and just say, okay, now that you know these words, just learn through exclusively talking to people, I will hate you, because that really will drain my introvert battery. So everyone has their own preferred way of learning. This is probably why they say there's no one-fit-all method for language learning. It's really really because people's personality types are vastly different. I'm gonna make a video on this specifically because this is something I'm super passionate about. I'm a personality fiend. It kind of comes off in a weird way, but I love looking at personality types. Definitely will create a video on that. So the third way that I've messed up my languages in the past was by watching a bunch of TV shows, especially Japanese back in the day, a lot of anime, and watching it with English subtitles, obviously dubbed in Japanese, but with English subtitles, and just assuming somehow through osmosis that language is just gonna get into my skull. It never did. You know, a little bit, but when you are watching TV, especially if you're in, like, let's say you're a beginner, you don't want to watch something in Danish with no subtitles, you're not gonna understand shit. I understand. You can always watch something with English subtitles, it's fine. But the problem is just thinking that through osmosis, through watching 800 episodes of One Piece, that somehow, even if you're watching with English subtitles, it's gonna go into your skull, because that's not the case. What you need to be doing is you need to be actively watching. It doesn't matter if you're only doing a little bit of it, but I would say, as a rule of thumb, for every 30 minutes you watch a TV show or a YouTube video in your target language, you should definitely jot down at least 3 words. Because that way, if you watch an hour worth of, you know, TV shows every single day, then at least you're probably jotting down 5 to 6 new words every single day, and that really builds up over time, especially if you're putting those new words in something like Anki and remembering them. Now, point number 4, another way that I frequently messed up, I had a lot of troubles keeping consistent, especially in the earlier stages. And consistency with studying is not even the biggest thing, right? Obviously, there's probably gonna be 20 days, 50 days, 100 days, 364 days out of the year where you're just like, screw this, I'm not gonna do it. Where you're really not motivated, I call them low motivation days. That's perfectly fine, that's normal. I would say not to push yourself, not to force yourself to study on those days. However, what is crucial is that you keep the language that you're learning fresh in your head during those days. Because what happens, and what happened to me personally, is I would go and I would study, you know, I would say, hey, I don't wanna study this language today, fine. And then that day would become another day, and then all of a sudden I haven't studied for a week. And the issue is, if you haven't consumed or exposed yourself to the language at all in that week, then you really start forgetting big chunks of it. The goal here is, even if you don't want to study, even if you can't be bothered to study for a week, or for a few days, or for a month even, make sure you're at least exposing yourself to 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes of the language per day through TV shows, through YouTube videos, through surprising people in real life, I don't know. Just expose yourself to the language during your down days, because everyone has them, and that way it keeps the language fresh in your head, so when you do return, you're not like, oh shit, I forgot everything, screw this, I'm really not gonna study now. You're more like, oh, actually everything is still fresh, not bad. So the penultimate way I messed up, so point number 5. In the past, well, it's everybody's favorite topic. Grammar. I used to get cocky, and I think this is very common for a lot of language learners. For example, with like my Japanese and my Russian, especially Japanese and Russian, which were the worst languages to get cocky for. I would think, I know how to say, I can go to the toilet, and I went to the toilet, boom, I'm an expert. I know most of the basic grammar, right? No, no. One thing that happened to me is I would get cocky. I would kind of think, oh, I get the gist of the grammar now, therefore I'm not really gonna focus on grammar at all. I'm gonna ignore it. It's gonna, by osmosis, somehow get into my head. And after 8 months of watching One Piece with English subtitles, apparently I'm just going to know all the grammar just intuitively. Especially for harder languages, that never works, that never happens, because the grammar is so vastly different from English. It's almost like that it's literally impossible to intuitively understand how it works unless you expose yourself to that language for like 10 years. So my recommendation is, 1, not to get cocky with the grammar. There's always new things to learn, but grammar also doesn't have to force you to be, you know, this monk in his study just, you know, writing, studying. But as well, you shouldn't let grammar... Pigeon just pooped. right on my yard. But although grammar is annoying, I would say the point when it's the most annoying is when you're a beginner, you really don't know the language at all, and someone is just throwing you all these grammar rules for you to kind of study, and it never works, right? What you have to do is, obviously in the beginning stages, you have to kind of acquaint yourself to the basics of the grammar, but once you get past the basics, it is important that you keep on studying grammar rules just a little bit every day or every other day, and it doesn't have to be super structured as working your way down a textbook. It can be, but it also can be like, for example, let's say you're having a conversation with someone, or even if you're just thinking to yourself and you're like, I would have gone to, and you're like, whoa, how would I say I would have in Japanese? I haven't thought about that. Well, it's time to think about it. It's the time to note it down. Whenever you have these little small realizations that you don't know how to express, you know, this concept in English in your target language, please take the initiative to then go make a note for it and go search Google and see how the grammar works relating to that point in your target language. It could even be like 5 to 10 minutes every other day of grammar, just keeping up and searching things that you're kind of uncertain about and things that keep on popping up in the, you know, the TV shows that you're hearing. I would say that is a great plan. Alternatively, you could batch it, so you could say, okay, I'm not going to touch grammar for 5 months, but on month 6, I'm going to have a grammar month and really go hard with studying grammar and you know, the rules, now that especially that you have a better understanding of the language. It's a lot more fun to study the grammar and the underlying rules when you actually have quite a bit of exposure to the language, but either method would work out. More or less, I'm just trying to tell you, don't get cocky and do what I did in the beginning, where I was like, oh, I know a little bit of the grammar, so therefore I'm good. It doesn't work like that, unfortunately. The last part is very quick, but it's very important, and it's also probably the hardest one to pull off in this whole video. And that is not comparing yourself to other people. For me, my personal experience with comparison being the robber of all joy in my life, at least in my language learning life, came especially when I was learning Japanese, when I was like 15, 16 years old. I think by the time I was 17 years old, I saw the video with Tim Donor with speaking 20-something languages came out, and I was like, woof. It was inspiring, but it was also like, wow, what am I doing with my life? And the biggest thing that I've learned over the years is that the only person that you can really compare yourself to is your previous self. If I was demotivated by seeing that video to the point where I didn't continue with my Japanese, I would not speak any of the languages that I do now today. So the most important thing, only compare yourself to the you from a year ago, the you from 2 weeks ago. So yeah, I know that it is a big ask, but it is very, very important, because you never know the context behind any specific learner. Someone could speak Italian after 2 months amazingly, but they actually were raised speaking Spanish, so it's not much of a challenge, whereas you, maybe you've been trying to do it for 3 years and you still feel like you can't. You don't know the context behind the learner, so the only person that it is safe to compare yourself to is your previous self. And when you do that, and when you're very adamant about it, and I mean, it still happens to me occasionally as well, but when you really push yourself to only do that, that's when you start seeing greatness happen. That was the video, guys. Thank you so much. I've recorded this video 4 times, but had so many technical difficulties. Oh my God. But I really do hope that you enjoyed it, that it was impactful for you. If you like this kind of introspection and learning from my past, then you would definitely like my book, Fluency Made Easy, because it's basically all of my lessons and my method that I developed through years and years of language learning. It's available at fluencymadeeasy.com, and be sure to like and subscribe, because I shot this video 4 times, 20 minutes each. It was not fun, but finally it's coming out. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video about personality types and language learning.